My guest is Martin Tobias, who's a CEO and chairman of Imperium Renewables, which is the biggest producer on the west coast at the moment of biodiesel and is about to become the biggest producer in the US when its refinery in Seattle comes online in July.
Grays Harbor, about 2 hours south of Seattle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me what you do. It's the buzz industry, it's the future. Tell me why it is.
Well, you know, as we heard earlier today from Bob and from other speakers, we're running out of oil. The stuff is there's not that much of it left. We're probably already have passed the peak of world oil. US oil peaked in '72, North Sea peaked about 3 years ago. For transportation, really we're stuck with oil until Elon sells 1 million of his Teslas. So we really need plug and playable, you know, hot swappable liquid hydrocarbons that replace oil. And biodiesel and ethanol are the only ones that are available to scale at any kind of size right now. So.
And it goes in cars without modification, and it doesn't wreck them.
Biodiesel goes into any diesel vehicle without any modification. Ethanol is limited to about a 10% blend before you need to get a flex fuel vehicle, and that's because of the oxygen content of the fuel. Ethanol actually has about 30% less energy density per gallon than unleaded does. Biodiesel has the same energy density as diesel. You can use it in the same cars, you can use it in the same pipelines, you can use it in the same distribution structure. So biodiesel is actually much more replaceable to diesel than ethanol is to unleaded.
Just explain the process to an ignoramus like me. And what do? You grow a crop, you harvest the crop, you turn it into oil, you stick it through a refinery, and you stick it in a car. Or is that too simple?
You got it, that's it.
Okay.
That's it for biodiesel. For biodiesel, it's a little bit different than ethanol. We use oilseed crops, so we work on the lipid part of the crop versus ethanol, which works on the sugar part of the crop. And so there's many oil seeds: soybean oil, canola oil, palm oil. Those are all basically food oils today. And we take the oil in that's already been crushed in a separate facility, and we run this thing called transesterification. And transesterification is kind of chemistry 101. You basically are taking, oil is a triglyceride. It's 3 ester molecules attached to a glycerin molecule. And you want to chop the glycerin molecule off, attach a methanol molecule to it to make it burn easier. And that's the transesterification process.
What's the economics of it? What's the cost of it?
The cost of making biodiesel, because of the cost of the veg oil, right now is about $1 a gallon more than the cost of making petroleum diesel at $62 a barrel. Luckily in America, we have about $1 a gallon subsidy from the federal government. So right now, we're about break even on a retail basis with petroleum diesel at about $62 a barrel.
So the cost at the pump is?
The cost at the pump is about the same. Actually, last year, due to the spike that we had, you know, $75 oil and so on, biodiesel was cheaper than diesel for 8 months of the year last year. And this year, I think we're at parity to slightly less at the pump. In Seattle, diesel prices are about $3.15 a gallon, and biodiesel is about $3.05. So, you know, they really track the cost of their inputs, the veg oil and the crude oil, more than they track each other. And right now we just are at inversion, which is a great place for us because we can't make it fast enough. When the replacement product that is clean, environmentally friendly, doesn't cause war, is cheaper than the, you know, war carbon death product, you can sell a lot of
it. What happens to the economics if demand takes off and the price of grain, let's say, starts to rise, and the price of bread starts to rise, and people start saying, hold on, I'm paying more for bread because these people are taking all the grain to turn into stuff peacefully, of course, that you stick in cars. What happens to the long-term graph?
Well, we're actually at an interesting inflection point. We've already started to see some of that. You might have seen the tortilla riots down in Mexico. The price of corn has doubled in the last year, and that's because of the demand in ethanol. We now use over 26% of our U.S. Corn crop for ethanol. And what is happening, I think we talked earlier about this, if you look back in the 1800s, all energy was really caloric energy. You'd feed grain to horses, and horses would pull you around. You'd eat stuff yourself, and you'd do your work. It was biofuels, but it was just, you ate it, and then you had a horse pull you around. But then we found a more efficient way to deliver energy and calories and more density, and that was crude oil. And that was because the cost of that energy density and delivering that was cheaper than the cost of delivering the agricultural energy, which is actually not very dense. But what's happened now that, oil started out about $1 a barrel, now it's 60, 70. Now the price of that is more expensive than the price of delivering the food calories. And so now people are starting to look at these crops for the energy value versus the calorie value. And in fact, the energy value of corn and soy and canola is more than the food value. So the price of all the food stuffs are going up. What we are working on, and the industry I hope is going to work on, is agricultural crops that are specifically designed to express the energy components versus the food components, so we get out of this food versus fuel thing. But the reality is right now that because of the high price of energy, the energy value of these food crops is greater than the food value, and that means we're going to use them for energy.
How do you plant a crop differently for fuel than to eat it?
Yeah. Well, one thing is you can plant a crop that does not have a food use. For example, the speaker earlier was talking about Hawaii. I was just there last week. We're building a refinery there. I'm strategically locating my refineries very close to the good surf spots, which I thought is a business plan I follow very wisely. It's worked for me before. We're thinking about planting jatropha over there. And jatropha is a plant from India. It produces about 340, 360 gallons of oil per acre, but it is non-edible. It's toxic, in fact. So it is a crop that has not been grown in agricultural scale because there's no food use of it. But it also is a crop that grows with very little water. It only requires about 20 to 40 inches of water a year. It can grow on arid in the deserts. So here is a crop that is a weed in India with no food use, but a great fuel use. It's about 40% oil. So we can start planting on marginal lands this crop, not compete with the same farmlands that we use for food because it has different things. There's no food use for it. So you can put all of these, program acres that, American taxpayers are paying to not be farmed into farming a commercially economically viable crop. That's one way. The second way is to twiddle with the genomics of the seeds themselves. Soybeans right now, the version of soy that we plant was really been engineered to express the meal component, not the oil component. Soybean is about 14% oil and about 86% meal because they primarily grow it for the feed. Well, through genetically modifying it, you can express a greater percentage of oil versus meal. And so you can plant a version of soy which has 30, 40% oil. So I think people are going to, Monsanto and those guys are farting around with that, trying to get a higher percentage of oil expressed in existing crops too.
Does it change what the country, we have a romantic view of the countryside, don't we?
Yeah.
Rolling fields or whatever,
Yeah.
wheat fields in the US, I'm quite sure. Does it change the way our land looks?
It shouldn't because, unfortunately, the way that, our farmland looks right now is there's a lot of unemployed people out there. And a lot of family farms have failed. And, the U.S. agricultural future did not look very good prior to corn ethanol and soybean oil. And it's really caused a revitalization of the rural economy because now all of a sudden the fuel value is high enough where people can actually make a living. So I think that's good. I don't think in the next 3 to 5 years will change the way the rural economy looks because you'll be planting the same kind of row crops just with a higher energy density. But what the future of biofuels is new kinds of farms that farm new kinds of organisms. Like there are versions of algae that express about 10,000 gallons of oil per acre versus soybean, which is 30 gallons of oil per acre. What you're trying to do is work about density of oil production per acre. That's why the oil industry loves their energy density, because you drill a hole, you stick a straw in it, and you suck out billions of dollars. It's hard to go gather up stuff from all over to get the energy density that you need. But if we start building algae farms, and there's a couple companies starting to do that, you'll need a new kind of farm. It'll basically be a big, open pond, maybe covered, and we'll start seeing those out, and those will change the physical landscape.
It sounds very, Brave New Worldish and exciting and all that kind of thing, but how feasible?
Soylent Green, yeah.
To what degree can it actually take over from oil, or is it going to be an interesting bit on the fringes?
Well, it's kind of interesting if it depends on whether you believe peak oil and how much, how quickly we're going to have to replace these fuels. And right now, biodiesel and ethanol are the only two technologies that are available to scale. With the current feedstocks and the current agricultural economy, you're basically locked at maybe a 4 to 10% replacement value for you in the U.S. anyway. You can't grow using current agricultural infrastructure more than that amount without. Even if you put 100% of the U.S. corn crop into ethanol, you'd only be producing about 20 billion gallons of ethanol, and you have 180 billion gallons of unleaded used in the U.S. every year. So the industry really needs to get very quickly to energy-dense crops and farming methods that can produce enough. On the algae side, there's already been a professor that's done the math, and you basically would need a 100 mile by 100 mile square piece of desert, basically, because this stuff, all it needs is sunlight. And you would replace all of the U.S. diesel requirements with a 100 mile by 100 mile square piece of desert, which actually is very small.
And what is diesel as a proportion of?
Diesel we use about 62 billion gallons of diesel a year versus 180 billion gallons of unleaded.
So if I'm doing the maths right, you're saying that 100 miles by 100 miles is a third of U.S. automobile fuel use?
Yes. It would be 100% of the diesel use. 100%
Right.
of the diesel use.
Okay. What about the environment? Because some people imagine it's a clean fuel, doesn't have a carbon footprint. I can't believe I used that jargon, but I just did. But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's not a clean fuel, is it? It sticks stuff in the environment.
Oh no, it's completely fine.
And it takes energy to make the stuff. Where does it figure in that bit of politics?
Well, each biofuel, each alternative to oil, has its own economics and its own total life cycle. Ethanol is actually a pretty inefficient fuel, especially corn ethanol, because basically what you do is you take the corn, you throw it in a still, you have to heat it up to 1200 degrees to crack the corn into alcohol, and that takes a lot of natural gas. 20% of your COGS number in an ethanol plant is the natural gas cost. So when you look at the total life cycle of ethanol, it's generally about 1.1, 1.2 units of energy out for every unit you put in, so it's barely positive. Now, it's better than oil because in oil, it's about 0.8. You're actually destroying energy when you drill oil. All of the energy that it needs to drill it, to ship it, to distribute it, you're destroying energy. In biodiesel is actually the most energy positive alternative that's out there, and that's because a biodiesel plant runs at about 200 degrees instead of 1200 as an ethanol plant. It takes a lot less energy to crack oil into biodiesel, so the energy balance of biodiesel is about 3.6 units of energy out for every unit you put in. And if you think about it, you're getting all this free energy from the sun. You're growing a plant, it's eating carbon from the environment, it's taking energy from the sun, you're crushing that plant up, you're burning it, you're eating it again, so you have a closed loop carbon system. It's very unlike oil, which is basically, dig up dinosaur, expel carbon, no offset.
How dependent is the development of this thing now on a very high oil price?
Well, like I said, we're at about $60 a barrel break even right now. And, I think that the industry and advancements in feedstock technology and new crops are going to get our cost down to about $30 a barrel break even. And I don't know anyone whose forward curve on oil, is under 50. So I think that the industry will be able to be self-sustainable against oil within about 3 or 5 years without government subsidy. That's my whole goal, is to try to create a sustainable value chain that can compete with petroleum without government subsidies. In the beginning, we're going to need subsidies, we're going to need some help, because the oil industries, they're an oligopoly, and they hate change, and they're doing a lot of things to try to kill us and to try to keep all of you addicted to their environmentally unfriendly killing product.
What? I can't let that pass, though. What are they doing to try and kill you?
Well, they're selling a product that destroys the environment.
No, what are they doing to try and kill your industry?
Kill my industry? The first thing, it's actually interesting. I wrote on the plane down here a couple of parallels. It's incredibly interesting to me, the parallels that the big oil monopolists are having against what happened to big tobacco. And if you think, the first tool out of their toolbox is denial. It was only this year that Exxon stopped funding a climate change denial industry. They fund their own scientists to say, no, climate change doesn't happen. Our product doesn't do anything bad. That's the first tool out of the box. The second tool out of the box is, don't worry about it, we'll solve it. That's why BP is now beyond petroleum. And don't worry about it. We just gave, Conoco just gave $150 million to Stanford to study the problem for another 20 years. So that's tactic 3. Delay change, put it off. It's not going to be, in your lifetime. Don't worry, we're studying it and we'll solve it. Then the fourth tactic, of course, is kill alternatives. I can tell you story after story of the number of lobbyists in DC where they have written in little things to economically disadvantage and slow down the growth of my business. And then the last tactic they have is something I learned at Microsoft called fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD. And not that I ever practiced that at Microsoft. But basically they, spread fear of change. And if you look at the food versus fuel debate right now, it is 100% funded by the oil companies. The oil companies are saying, don't use this for fuel because you're taking the food out of the mouths of starving babies. I saw a press release from Shell saying it is immoral to use palm oil for fuel because you're going to starve babies in Africa. And this is absolutely unbelievable behavior, but it is fairly expected from an industry that knows their resources running out, their product kills people, causes war, and they are hanging on with the fingertips to the last bits of profit that they can get, and that's what you would expect them to do.
I think our time's are out. This talk, by the way, was sponsored by ExxonMobil. Thank you very much. Indeed.
Thank you.